Hi, Randy. I thought you weren't here.
I
Did
wasn't,
you just slip in?
My wife was released from the hospital. The stress test came back negative, so
good.
she did have a heart attack, but she's not being kept tonight. She was kept last night, so.
Oh my goodness, we'll give her our best.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Oh my goodness.
So she's out in the car. She might come in. Oh, no, she did come in.
Oh my goodness. Oh.
So this is dedication, right?
This
That or
is
insanity.
true dedication. Wow. Yeah. Okay, we're going to start the test.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm going to be real brief because I obviously don't have any prepared remarks, but I did want to make a few comments. And I was watching online earlier, and I know that some of these points have been addressed, but the question of, is there research that proves this method of teaching is effective, was not really answered. They said they'll send you some research, but the research they talked about was the research they were doing. It wasn't based on an empirical study of, is this method effective? So I really want y'all to look for that research, because I know it doesn't exist. Dr. Milgram knows it doesn't exist. We've talked to him. So if that research exists, I'd love to see it. I've been asking for it for 2 years. So that's one thing. Oh, Mr. Allen's not here. I wanted to thank him. Oh, there you are. I want to thank you for pointing out that the way the STAR is being said that there's improvement, you are absolutely correct. You can't compare it to last year's standards. You got to compare it to this year's. Thank you for making that point. Knowledge and skills should always be taught with the inclusion of conceptual understanding. I think Chris hit on those points. The Reformed math people have always said that the kids are just taught to memorize, 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 and that has never been the case. And I've tried to make that point clear. But you don't continue these models well into upper grades. Like the sixth grade that I gave you yesterday, testing TEKS 6.10, it calls for models. And this particular model, which is on page 48, the model does nothing to help you actually solve this problem. It's 27 with 12 P's underneath in a box. It doesn't help you divide that 27 by 12 and get 2 1/4. The model is completely useless, yet a sixth grader has to use that model. This is the kind of stuff we're talking about. Modeling should happen in the early grades, but not later than third grade. By third grade, they should be getting down to their facts.
Randy, where was this on your handout?
Page 48.
48, sorry.
This has 53 pages of those kind of examples from the 2015 test and the 2016 test. Now, the thing I was actually going to give you all today was my analysis of all the 2016 tests. And I will say that the questions are actually better this year than previous years.
Really?
There's less on just testing a process, so I was impressed with that. But there are 2 mistakes, one in 8th grade and one on the algebra. So I'll send those to you via email because I didn't have a chance to finish that. I'll wrap up. I know that was my bell. But I forget which testifier it was yesterday that said, yes, we still teach the standard algorithms, but because of all these other 7 or 8 ways of doing it, the pictorial models and area model and all that stuff, she says, yeah, we still teach the standard algorithm, but it's pushed out. And that's where the problem lies. When you push out that more efficient way to solve the problem, the kids don't get that base understanding of how the algorithms work to apply it to upper level math. So that was the point I wanted to make. So that's all I've got.
Thank you, Randy. Anybody have a question for Randy? Yes, Mr. Rowley.
I'm kind of violating our own rule about making this in the form of the question, but I'll kind of lift my voice at the end like it's a question, okay? But at least, hopefully, you've seen, I hope, is this true, Randy? Let me put it this way, that you've seen a level of response as a result of your diligent, concerted, dedicated effort to bring this issue to the attention to this board, in the sense that, I mean, personally, I think you and Lori and John and others who have been here testifying were the impetus for us having this work session yesterday. Honestly, I mean, because you had brought it to our attention, and you are the voice of, as Chris said, the voice of the consumer, the customer, the parent, and as a result of that voice and what you all have brought here, that's why we had the conversation yesterday. Now, whether or not it's going to come out the way you all would like to see it come out is, part of the process. It's, just the way it is. But
you want to keep seeing me, don't you?
I love you, Randy. I really feel like I've gotten to know you a lot better than I ever would have, if not for this. But hopefully, let me ask, hopefully you see a level of response anyway to the fact, and I hope that you take with you a sense of accomplishment, in the sense that you all have been here, brought this to our attention, and were it not for your voice, yesterday probably wouldn't have occurred, nor would this conversation today.
And
do you
I do
agree?
appreciate that. Yes, I do agree. I appreciate it. I will not take credit for it, because there's been a lot of people that are fighting this battle. John, Chris, Lori, a lot of us have been looking at this, but we do recognize that y'all are trying to address the problems.
Miss Miller and Mr. Mercer.
I want you to have the credit.
Thank you so much for coming forward. But my question is, here, just like I said earlier, what would you do in this situation?
I've actually taken these standards and started marking them up and looking at what Dr. Milgram put in place in California when he cleaned up the same type of reform math there. I'm actually going to give you at least elementaries, but I've also started on even all the way up into algebra. As I've reviewed these problems and looked at the wording that creates the issues, I've been actually striking those. I haven't gone back and reordered anything, because I do think I've made notes of things that I think are out of place or out of order, but I haven't tried to add anything. I'm just striking the things that I think need to be gone. Like if you just remove the process standards, and this was made earlier, it doesn't solve the problem, because you've got these methods called out in the content standards. And Nikki told us yesterday that was never meant to be. And they would have changed that had they had a chance to do a final review after everything was stitched together.
Okay.
So she agrees that you don't list out 7 different, and that 3.4 that John was talking about earlier, that's the same one I've been talking about. 7 different methods are called out, and because they're called out, they have to be tested on the assessment, and you see it in the assessment. And since it's on the assessment, it's in the curriculum, it has to be taught. So 7 different ways of teaching multiplication and division, and that takes time. That's how things get pushed off into later years, and calculus will not be available for high school students in the next year or two if we don't start making the change. Because since it isn't tested, they're not going to offer it. Kids aren't going to take it. So that's you see that in states like California, they've already dropped calculus from their curriculums.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Another question. Then we're in a dilemma that we, board that has already approved these standards, okay, and math standards, and the books, and they're out there, okay, and the test is out there. So I don't see how we can go back, to the beginning, even though ideally maybe you want to. So do you have any suggestions?
I'll know more when I'm through with my markups.
Okay.
I don't have a solution either.
Yeah.
That's why we're here talking about it.
Yeah.
What can we do? What should we do? And I know there was a parade of people yesterday and today saying we don't need to do anything.
Right.
But I think y'all know that isn't true. And when you look at the interest that those people have, they're the ones who wrote this. What you need to get are the people who, like Dr. Milgram, who walked away from this because he didn't agree with what was happening. Get Nikki Hayes back in here and talk to her for longer than 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah, I was very impressed with her yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
And we do appreciate that invite. We know that he's the one who said no to coming.
Right. Yeah, subpoena him, yeah. I think it is important to just address the folks who spoke to us. This was a recommendation that staff was, because we asked them specifically to give us the background and history of how the development of the stand. That was a specific request of the board, and that's who came to speak to us, was what we asked for, which is talk to us about the development. What were you looking at? What did you consider? You know, why did you do the process? I mean, I gave them a list of, what was 12 questions or something. It was a long list of very specific problems and issues we were struggling with, and asked for their input on. So that's who it was. Dr.
Yeah.
Milgram was invited and chose not to participate. Unfortunately, we would have liked to have heard from him.
And I thank you for extending the invitation to me. I realize you didn't have to do that. Thank you for letting me.
No,
do that.
absolutely. Well, member Rowley requested, and I think other members wanted to as well. Plus, we want to hear the parent voice first. So, Mr. Mercer and then Dr. Dominguez.
And I really appreciate the term voice of the customer. I keep talking business-wise. I know the commissioner and his life too, when I hear that, because I'll get I'll continue my voice. My question is, good morning. The three of y'all, Chris, John, Laurie's not here, and Randy.
Lori was here earlier. She had to leave to get her kids.
Are any of y'all
Wednesday.
educators?
Well, I will tell you, I'm not an educator,
background?
but I do actually do free tutoring for
I
just
think
about
all of you are
everybody.
engineers, aren't you? All
John and I
three?
are engineers, yes. Lori's a doctor. She's a
Chris, an engineer or
pediatrician.
what?
Chris, what are you?
So an MBA, 2 engineers, and a doctor. So you're just pretty much the average parents we have, right, in Texas?
Well, I will say this. I probably have more practical applications of mathematics than all of your testifiers yesterday combined. I know more about the application of mathematics in industry than any of them.
I was being facetious, but my point was that in terms of if 2 engineers, an MBA, and a pediatrician are having trouble with their kids, you're not the average moms and dads, and that's what kind of worries me. Let me get back to what we can do, because I keep thinking about the arguments we had before in social studies, for example, this such as versus including. In my mind, what I'm seeing is we're seeing these methods and processes, and I think we meant to say such as, but not including all 6 or 7. And
Yeah.
maybe that's the problem. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe we need guidance in the board saying, hey, whenever you see a method or a process, I'm being simplistic, but maybe our answer is, our guidance should be, hey, there's a problem here. These processes and methods are such as. We never meant you to say, in addition to being what's called is it a mile wide and an inch deep, Thomas, we're also going to have a third dimension where we want 7 processes.
Right.
So I'm wondering, for guidance to the board, is it possible, and I know it's not simplistic, and I know what Tyncy and Marty are trying to go to, maybe it's that, maybe we need a message guidance saying we never meant to, in addition to all these standards, to require all these processes. It's a such as process, whichever works for the child, but we never meant to say every process. Board members, am I hitting on something? Am I understanding? Because and we've discussed such as including on many different topics, and I see that problem here where maybe an educator sees that and thinks, I've got to teach every process to do this.
Well, they actually do, since it's called out in the content standards.
And because
So I think if you took them out of the content standards, left them in the introduction of each grade, I think that's fine. And none of us are opposed to actually the idea behind these process standards of applying it to everyday life and thinking about being able to communicate your ideas. But that's not where the priority lies. The priority lies is can you do the computation and can you get the correct answer? Can you do it the most efficient way, and are you correct in your answer?
And that's the real
what's
world.
important.
That's the real world.
That's the real world.
Right answer.
How TASM's treating it. They're
Right.
treating it such as.
Now, if you took those, it made them such as, and that, I think it was Mr. Yo's yesterday who said, creating a separate document that gives examples of how you can teach some of these things. I think that would be great, but I don't think they need to be in the TEKS. I don't
Well,
think they need to be
the
in the
changing the whole thing one by one, as Tyncy mentioned, is very problematic, but maybe an overall guidance saying every method and process is a such as, never meant to be including all. But I have one more real important question.
Let me just interject just one thing, Mr. Mercer. What we need to do, we have 6 more items on the agenda.
Yes.
And we are losing people that have to testify to us about
Well-
these items. So I want to, this is posted as an
I
action
understand,
item.
but this has
We
been
need
2
to-
years, and these parents have been doing
Right.
this, and I'd rather, like Mr. Rowley said last time, we're getting tired of, not tired of y'all, I'm tired of saying we can't do anything about it, and I don't like that answer, but please move to District 5 as soon as
Okay.
possible. Love to have you. Thank you.
All right. Dr. Dominguez, do we have any more for Randy or? or do we
Well,
want to just
I
have,
just
we
wanted-
just need to move
Yeah,
on
I
to?
just wanted to mention to him, thank you, because of you, we did have all the training that we had. And so I now clearly understand that the process is the way we should go, because weren't we shown on Monday that our students are scoring well in math? And so I just
Well,
want
I
to tell you
question that
thank you.
because a passing in Algebra 1's at 37%, so I'm not sure where some of that's coming from. And as low as 50 on some of the other grades, so how much do they really understand?
No, I think she was talking about the NAEP. You were talking about the NAEP?
Yeah.
Not the state test, I'm talking about the NAEP.
Okay.
I think it's what she was talking about.
It-
Well, it was NAEP.
Yeah,
It was NAEP.
NAEP has held fairly steady, not shown any increase. The increase was in the prior years before that. The last 2 years have kind of held steady. So I'm,
Mr. Mayor,
yeah,
did
well, they've
you?
implemented this a few years ahead of
Are you
us.
done?
So.
Do we have any more testifiers on this issue?
I think that's it for the test fires, correct?
And if I'm not mistaken, this is a,
It's an
action
action.
item?
This is an action item.
And this will be for first reading, so.
Yes.
I know that I'm not sure when to bring this up, but I'd kind of like to hear from the field. I know TASM is putting together a survey, and I don't know if there's a way we could postpone this, or I don't know
I
what the
mean,
correct terminology.
I can entertain a motion as to what we should do. So, yes. Ms. Hardy's hand was up, or no, Mr. Mayor, you were still talking.
I still was, yeah, so.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
you can choose just not to take
So I'm
action.
just,
Yeah, we
So-
can choose not to take action, but we'd have to vote not to take action, wouldn't we?
I
Or
don't
no?
think so. You just don't, there's no motion, you take no action, then the
Okay.
item does not go forward. Right.
Committee has no, oh, I see, okay. So, Mr. Maynard, did you have a motion or something, or did you want to just, what'd you want to do?
yeah, I'm gonna move that the State Board of Education suspend the board operating procedures in accordance to 5.2A to allow the consideration of first reading and filing authorization, to approve for first reading and filing authorization proposed amendments to 19 TAC, Chapter 111, Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills for Mathematics, Subchapter A, Elementary, Subchapter B, Middle School, and Subchapter C, High School.
So, this is basically the staff recommendation, is what you
Right.
are putting forward. I mean, but it's the, yeah, okay. I mean, it's not a staff recommendation.
Parliamentary inquiry.
This is
Yes.
just a motion to.
Why is the maker needing to suspend our rules, which will require a
Yeah, that's why I
two-third
got a little
threshold?
confused on the.
Mr. Bradley, the reason for that is that you're going straight to first reading without a discussion item on these proposed amendments.
First reading is posted for November, or we're doing?
So this is language that we were advised, because your operating procedure says you should have a discussion of proposed amendments prior to first reading. And in this instance, there was not a discussion item presented.
You have to
We
suspend
went
the rules.
straight to a first reading.
So it will require a two-third threshold, okay.
Yes, Mr.
So I've got a
Ms.
motion,
Hardy,
Madam Chair.
Ms. Hardy, and then, are you finished? Mr.?
I made a motion. Was there a second?
Yeah, there was a second, Dr.
Okay,
Dominguez.
very good. And to speak to my motion?
Yes, why don't you speak to your motion?
Yeah, thank you. First right of refusal.
Okay, I need a break.
You give him the floor and he'll never yield it. That's the problem. That's why she doesn't come.
Did.
I am sorry, Mr.
Madam Chair, members of the board, and I, we have, we have been pushing this, like a child pushing peas around a plate or something like that for quite some time, and keep in mind that this is first reading, and should we pass this motion today, should we do that? We haven't actually done it. It's first reading, and I think that at some point is that it's time to rip the Band-Aid off, and if nothing else, is that we can, by going to first reading and publishing that in the Texas Register, is that we will precipitate a great deal more of input and public comment. And at least we are moving forward and that sort of thing. We're making a good faith effort. We are listening to constituents. I will tell you that there is not a great amount of unanimity, even in the profession on this. I think that there's a lot of issues, and I think that this is a good way to move forward, at least initially, keeping in mind that we could that you put it out there. We have a process called second reading. And so I've made the motion, and I would encourage my fellow members of the board to support it. Thank you.
Ms. Hardy and then Mr. Rowley. Oh, did I miss Sue? Oh, okay.
When we talk about our process, and earlier, or yesterday, we were talking about process, we didn't want, this is so adverse to our process. The idea that we would even consider first reading and filing authorization for something that has not been put out there. I didn't know about it until I read about it in my agenda. And, was in kind of a little bit of a shock about it. We must have public hearings, and I really would rather those public hearings not come on a second reading. I would really rather them come prior to a first reading. I also heard the TASM organization and the other math organizations say they are in the process of working out and getting feedback. You have to understand, most of you were not here when the math standards were written. There were over 200 teachers that had a part in that math development, and it was one of the first times that they ever did this kind of, I don't know how they did it electronically, but all these people weighed in on the math. It wasn't just the writing committees. So we felt very good about the number of people that had a part in that. I think that those organizations are willing to look and get feedback and find out from the people in the field what they think about this. We heard from a number of experts who are against making any changes. We have so early in that process of the TEKS. Just this, how simple it would be. If you change something like this, all the math books that are out there, even though you're saying, well, we'll still have the standards, but every book has their TEKS listed in there. It'll be so confusing to a new teacher, like where, why, who, what, why are we doing it this way? Because it will be in those books, and I'll be John Brown if we're going to give new books because we've messed things up ourselves. I mean, we're putting ourselves back behind the 8 ball. I just think that we need to not even do first reading and not do anything of this nature until we get the input from the whole state, from the field. We've heard from a few parents in this regional area and from Houston, but I think we haven't really touched the scope of the whole thing. Thank you.
Mr. Rowley.
Madam Chair, I agree with the member from Fort Worth. I understand maybe the intent of Member Maynard to do this, but it's a pretty draconian type of action. If we, regardless of whether we say, well, it's just for first reading, we're just inviting comment, it will go out on every wire service and everywhere else to say, State Board removes process standards from all math TEKS, and just imagine the uproar that it's going to create. I don't think it's a wise thing to do. And so I stand in opposition to the motion. I have a question though for a parliamentarian. So if we were to vote down this particular motion, would we then be able to move to table this agenda item to November?
You could postpone it.
Postpone it to November?
Yeah, we just talked about that.
Okay, so.
But by postponing, you want it to come back.
I want to come back in November, right. And so, then we'll look at it in November. And so, but I don't want it to just be evaporate into thin air without us having come to some resolution. So that's why, so then my proposed course would be, I'm speaking to the motion now, would be to vote against the motion and then to consider postponing this item until November. It would still be an action item, but at that point we would have more input than what we have so far, and at least then be able to maybe to craft a motion that would. You
wouldn't have had a discussion on it at that point.
Well, we've had a lot of discussion. We had 2 days, but if y'all let me finish, please, then what I propose we do, we'd be able to craft a resolution at least with more input than what we've had so far.
Parliamentary inquiry?
Who said that?
Point of parliamentary inquiry.
Yeah, Mr. Maynard.
Madam Chairman, and let me just ask the effect of the motion and what is being described. by my colleague from Amarillo, and that is that so if we receive a negative vote on the motion, then the motion is lost. However, in the discussion period, if we move the motion to postpone definitely to the next meeting, then in essence what we have done is that we have in fact from this point on the calendar set an agenda item in the next meeting. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, you definitely set an agenda item for the next meeting.
So,
Would that be reading it first?
Well, he's suggesting we're postponing, which means it's the same thing coming back, correct?
No action. Yeah, why not?
Talking about is taking essentially no
Let's
action today.
hear from
We're
the
not-
parliamentarian, just for a second.
On Friday, you moved to postpone it.
Okay, well, why don't you just say that in the mic there? I'd rather Kurt explain what the options are.
The motion that's pending is a recommendation out of a committee, right? So all we're going to do is by a majority vote make some kind of recommendation. That's all you're going to do. So it could be a motion to recommend postpone. You could recommend postponing. You could recommend, suspending the rules of doing first reading now. So you've got an opportunity here to make a decision on what your recommendation will be for Friday. And then on Friday, if the motion was to postpone, that would take a majority vote to do that. If the motion is to suspend the rules and then take up first reading, first you would have to, by a 2/3 vote, suspend your rules. Then you could take it up on first reading and it would be a majority vote.
Yeah, it's clear.
My floor or no? Okay, still my floor.
This is still your part.
So even with this pending motion, can I now move that the committee of the full board recommend that this agenda item be postponed until November?
You can't do that yet because we have to vote on the.
No,
it's a subsidiary.
I can do it
subsidiary.
even with his
subsidiary.
motion pending, right?
That would be an add-on.
It's a subsidiary motion.
It's an add-on?
If you can move to postpone the recommendation, but I have no idea where you're going to postpone it to a recommendation. The committee of the full board's recommendation, you can only postpone it to the committee meeting, the next committee meeting. So that gets screwy. The better thing is if this is voted down, then say you will move to recommend that we postpone. That's the better.
Okay. Ms. Perez. Ms. Perez. Did you have something to say or we're just going to vote? I'm sorry, Ms. Beltran.
I'm just confused. So when we're referencing first reading, does that mean that we're opening the process to review a whole new set of standards? But that would be the only change that would be made. It's not.
So they'll know that it's not going to take place. Who's recognized to speak? Only one person at a time.
Okay. Did we answer Ms. Beltran's question? You did, okay. Mr. Mercer.
I'm going to shock you. If Tom holds the motion up, I'm actually going to vote for the motion, even though I know we'll go down because it's symbolic, but I'm going to support the motion. I'm tired of telling parents who are our voices, I'm tired of saying we can't do nothing, and we've been 2 years doing this. I know the motion may go down. That's fine too. Then I yield to what Mr. Rowley suggested too. I want to be aware of needing a 2/3 majority though. I want to be parliamentarian. I'll be talking about later on if this goes down, a majority or 2/3 would come next. But whatever. I'm supporting the motion. I'm tired of waiting. I can't believe I'm doing this. The last thing I want to do is open up. However, I have a caveat. I will vote against anyone who wants to add any new standard later on. I'm voting to remove and clean up the language. So if anybody next time, first reading, second reading, tries to add a new standard to any grade, I will vote against that. Because that isn't my purpose. My purpose is to take what our teachers have done, what the content our educators put out there, to honor that, but get rid of these multiple processes and methods.
Okay, I just want to make sure that people know what we're voting on here because you need to look in your book and see the strike-throughs here and exactly what's being voted on. because that's the recommendation. Did you look at the strike-throughs? I want to make sure people understand what's being struck through here. So on page I-75? Oh, I-5. I want to make sure you're clear. This is taking an action, members. This is taking a specific action in the code. This is what what we're recommending here with this motion. So if you look on page I-9 as an example, sorry, I-10, you will see number 2, numbers and operations. Do you see that? Okay, the student, we're striking, applies mathematical process standards to understand. We struck that, and we now say the student understands how to represent and compare whole numbers, blah, blah, blah. Okay? And then, do you see it? Number 3 there, numbers in operation. Then you see 4, do you see all the strike-throughs? I just want to make sure you know exactly what the motion is that Mr. Maynard, I want to make it sure that you're clear what the motion is. So it's the adding of this language that is underlined, that's the adding, and then it's the striking through of the language that's there right now. Just to be sure that you know exactly what you're voting on with this recommendation. Mr. Ratliff.
I said earlier, I'm against the motion. I said earlier that because I don't feel like I have enough information, and that's partially why I'm against the motion. The second reason I'm against the motion is school started 3 weeks ago. Whatever we do is not going to change this school year. So the compelling need to alter our process and suspend the rules and put this on the fast track, getting this fixed in January ain't going to make any more difference than getting this fixed in April. It's not going to fix the current academic school year. So just like with ELAR, I think deliberation certainly outweighs being expeditious and trying to fix something fast just because we're kind of caught up in the moment. So I don't oppose what we're doing, but if the criticism we have now is what we did wasn't well thought out, well then the last thing we need to do is to remedy it with something else that wasn't well thought out. So I fully support bringing this back on first reading in November because as was pointed out earlier, to have all of the public testimony at second reading, that's the 11th hour amendments that we've all talked about doesn't yield good policy. So I agree we need to fix this, but fixing it in November is no better than fixing it in February or March or April, and we've got a lot better chance of doing it right.
Parliamentary inquiry?
Yes, Mr. Maynard.
Madam Chairman, it is my understanding that we are not voting on this action first reading. We are making a committee recommendation.
Well, right now we are.
That would be advanced to Friday, and at that point, then if we wanted to postpone it, then we could. But this is only a committee recommendation of the full board. Is that correct?
That's correct, and you can still vote on it on Friday, a different vote on Friday, because it'll still be on the action agenda.
Okay.
Parliamentary inquiry.
Yes, Mr. Redley.
If this motion fails, and the intent is to bring the item back for first reading and adoption in November, will this meeting fulfill the requirement for a public hearing? And if so, then it can move forward with just a majority vote in November, or will we have to have 2/3 to suspend the rules in November? Are you proud of me?
That is a good question.
We'll buy each other dinner tonight.
Free law one semester.
In first grade. Well, the lawyers got to earn their pay. We got 2 or 3 of them over there. Oh, here comes another one if you want another opinion.
Do we have to have a hearing? Before. Well, I mean, before.
But Madam Chair,
Yeah, I'm
parliamentary
sorry.
inquiry that dovetails with that. If we vote Friday to make November the first reading, then whether this counts as the discussion meeting or not, we've made the motion to begin at first reading in November. So either way, whether this meeting is the discussion meeting or not, if we vote 2/3 to make November first reading, we answer that question with our own vote.
Yeah.
But it would require 2/3 to.
But the thing is, if you vote to move it, to postpone it to first reading to November, you can't vote to postpone it again, as I understand. Is that correct?
No. Well, that's not a question.
Like if you postponed it, in other words, we need to act in November or not act, or it dies. Is that correct? Because we would have postponed it?
No, so the issue that you usually run into with a time frame is actually between first reading and second reading. And that is related to when we file a proposed rule with the Texas Register, you have to take final action within a certain period of time, or you have to start that process over again. So that has to do with the filing.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm pretty sure that I recall at least one instance where you had a first reading item that you postponed more than once. But until you actually take that action and we file with the register, there isn't any clock that starts.
Okay. I guess that's what I was thinking.
Madam Chair,
Yes, yes.
permission is requested to withdraw the motion.
You'd like to withdraw it?
Withdrawing the motion.
Okay. So,
I'd like to make another motion.
okay, is there any objection to withdraw the motion there? Okay.
All right. So, Madam Chair, I move that the committee of the full board recommend that we place this item on the November meeting on first reading.
Second.
That works for me. Let's just do it and get it over with. Madam Chair, I think you're the only one who has but if it's already been considered here, I think it can be postponed. So I don't care how it's worded, frankly.
Yeah,
Same effect.
Yeah, I
think all I need to do is say I'm just going to put it on the agenda, right?
So I think I might have heard a question over here that I
I'm
will
sorry.
attempt to address. There might be a little bit of confusion about what you're required to do. You're not required to have a public hearing. You do typically have public hearings, especially related to TEKS items and instructional materials items, but your procedures don't require that you have a public hearing. What your operating rules require is that you have a discussion of the proposal. And so, Mrs. Miller, because this is something that she reminded us of, and she's absolutely right. If we bring you an action item and you have not had an opportunity to have a discussion, then you're seeing it for the very first time. And so we do on occasion bring an item if, for example, you've got to make a change to comply with a law. There's not really anything for you to discuss or contemplate because you've got to make that change. So in those instances, that's when we'll typically go straight to first reading. We were doing that and then we're advised that really you should suspend that rule if you're not going to have the discussion. So that's why you're going to start seeing that language in those instances where we prepare an item specifically for action without discussion, which we've tried really hard not to do because then you don't have the benefit of that. That said, you'll have folks who can sign up to provide public testimony at discussion, first reading, second reading.
Yes, Ms. Beltran.
I apologize that I'm still not clear on this, but so if we were to open this up for first reading, would the comments and feedback be specifically related to the changes, the strikes, and the additions of that language, or are we now opening up the entire, an opportunity for people to make changes anywhere?
So anytime that you open up a rule for amendments, you'll typically have the amendments that we include based on usually your discussion so that we know. And you'll see this play out if we ever get to the next item on the agenda. Item 5 is actually a discussion of a rule item where we need your guidance before we can prepare the rule text. But once you open up a rule item, then certainly anybody can comment on anything, and any board member can propose any amendment to any portion of that rule.
Needs to be to that we recommend postponement.
Was there a second to this recommendation, actually? There was? Okay, because I missed it. Oh, yeah, Mr. Rowley. Okay. So, Mr. Cortez, then Ms. Hardy.
I guess I would speak against the motion. I think that if we're going to go down this course and open it back up, I would feel more comfortable if the course of action that we took in November was to have a public hearing followed by a January 1st reading. And then take it from there. And that way we give Texas the opportunity, we propose a public hearing, we let input come in, and then we determine what we do after that. But to say, oh, this is the public hearing, this isn't a public hearing. This isn't true form of a public hearing. Just because we had invited testimony, we had a half-day workshop, we didn't give Texas the full benefit of having a voice. And I don't want to be the one that says, hey, we didn't, just a few people, and that's what we're relying on. And even though there's math associations that came in and they say they speak for the masses, let's open it for the masses. And then we can move forward and have this dialogue pushed out to January if that's still the desire of this body once we hear public comment at a public hearing. So I would speak against the motion.
Yes, and then I had Ms. Hardy. Yeah.
One of the things that I think is very unusual is I've been on the board for a long, long time, and one of the things that we did not do is open this stuff up for the very reason that we're going through this right now, because when you open it, it's like opening a can of worms. You're going to have people coming in and wanting to make the changes. But I also want to remind the board that some time ago we came to the decision that the legislature wanted us to streamline the TEKS. And we decided that we would start with science since they were the oldest, then we would go to the social studies, then we would go to the math. So you can imagine the surprise when I opened up my agenda book and saw that we were opening up. This is like big deal, opening up, because I knew it's not just for this, it can be for anything else. And again, I like what Mr. Cortez, at the very most I would go with that, the idea that we would have some time here, but we have done many hearings over time periods before we get to something major like this. But when we open this up, it's not just for this, it is going to be for a lot more. And I think it's very dangerous. And frankly, I think that the science people and the social studies people are where the legislature would like for us to make this streamlining, especially the social studies. We can't get to that till you get to the science. And so we're putting all of that stuff off, or we're going to have more than we can say grace over, because remember in January, or in the first meeting, we'll have we'll have the English language arts second reading and for those TEKS. So I really can't quite understand why as a board we've gone away from our process. We had talked about doing science and social studies, doing the math after we did that because that was the most recent. We polled people. The people in the field said that they were comfortable with the math, that they thought that the streamlining wouldn't be as significant for them as it would be for those others. Those are put to the backfield. We've jumped this one up in front. And frankly, I just don't think that having, even if we did first reading in November, is giving the people in the field a long enough time to look into this, especially if we're going to open up the whole TEKS, because now we need to go back and bring in a committee to start looking at the math to follow our own process.
Parliamentary information.
Parliamentary.
Who said parliamentary first? Okay, Mr. Maynard.
This would be a question maybe to the parliamentarian and to legal, that, and the assertion has been made that, should we do this, then we open up the entire document, but if that is not the intent of the board to do that, is that can be restricted by how the item is posted. Would that be a true statement?
I don't think so.
So my understanding is that anytime that you have proposed amendments, the section, anything within that section would be open for amendments. So for example, the kindergarten essential knowledge and skills are in section 111.2. So there wouldn't be a way to only identify the knowledge and skills statements. It would be everything in 111.2.
You're telling me that you cannot
That's why it was such a big.
post something in such a way that you narrow the focus on that to where you can only discuss and take action on that one item within the.
That's been my understanding, and somebody will correct me if I'm wrong. Is that correct?
Sure.
Mr. Bradley, I'm going to let you were
Well,
next.
he beat me to it, and I thought I was going to get lightning to strike twice here.
Yeah.
But the board, by a, can the, hang on, this board by majority rule can do anything it wants. I think we can. We can overrule.
Okay. Madam Chair? So I was just advised that so what we would do is say 111.2, A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 5, no change. B, we would then list under B1, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, we would have to list all of those as no change, so that we would isolate just the knowledge and skill statements.
Thank you.
Yes, I've got Mr. Rowley and then Mr. Cortez. I think that's
Okay, I have another question. So would we be able to, and maybe this is for our parliamentarian, would we be able to post this item in November for a public hearing, and then in, February 2017? When's our first meeting? 2017?
last week of January.
Yeah, the first meeting in
Yeah.
2017 for first reading and action?
Yeah. I mean, you could have a public hearing and then discussion. So maybe if we use what you've done with English and Spanish language arts and reading as an example, we've been at discussion I think we will have been at discussion for 4 meetings.
That sounds right.
So you can continue
I'm sorry.
And you can add, so if you want a public hearing is, we put on your agenda as its own separate and distinct item. You can have a public hearing in conjunction with discussion, you can have a public hearing in conjunction with first reading or second reading.
Okay.
Yes. Is there motion pending? Are you going to?
Yeah, I'm going to move to amend his motion.
Okay, you're going to amend?
I move to amend the motion so that this agenda item is posted for public hearing at our November meeting, and then for first reading and action in our January 2017 meeting, and that it be posted for the limited purpose of amending those rules with regard to the process standards only, and knowledge and in the knowledge and skills statements. That's all I have to say about that.
Yes, Kirk wants to.
I think part of the problem here is that you have empowered, actually for several decades now, your chair to set the agenda, period. once an item gets on the agenda, the board then has power to delay or to not, to reject or whatever. But crafting how something gets on the agenda, I think there can be trouble if you go away from that. I think you're taking away the power that the chair has. So that would be, again, a motion to suspend the rules to be able to do that. I'm not sure. I'd have to find out what staff thinks about that. But
I'll just move to suspend the rules to accomplish that.
Madam Chair?
May I ask, yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry,
Ms. Martinez.
staff just reminded me of some additional information that you may want to be aware of before you take this vote. You have another public hearing on Proclamation 2017 in November. You also, we believe, and again, if we get to that item on the agenda today, you'll be able to confirm this for me, but it was our intent to have the invited testimony on the science streamlining in November also. So just want to make sure that you're aware of what you've already potentially got on your November agenda.
I guess, members, can I speak to that just a little bit? As we've seen with the English language arts and reading and Spanish language arts and reading, each meeting we get some information that causes us to not quite be ready to that next step. And so to prescribe that we must have a first reading that's too early for what we're talking about here. I think, that's just my personal thing. I think it's fine to have the discussion if you want to put it as an official discussion item, for that. But to say we will have it at first reading in January, I don't know that we want to, at this point, make that decision because we're not sure what we're going to hear back in November. So I guess I'm not sure understand why you would do that. Yes.
It's getting confusing. You've got a motion pending for a recommendation.
Speak to my motion. Except that I do want to accomplish an end date on this. And that's why I'm talking about setting in January, setting it for first reading, determination. I defer to my colleague from the Valley about having a full-blown hearing in November, inviting whoever wants to come testify. Great, that's fine. But I don't want to just continue to put this off and put it off. That's why I think the January setting is important.
That you want to?
Yeah, to
which is kind of why I put this on.
One way or the other. We either decide not to make any changes to the TEKS, or we decide to make the changes. That's why I.
And actually, that reasoning is why I put it as an action item this time. Actually.
Yeah, and I think it's time to do something about that. We owe it to the parents. We owe it to the teachers. I don't think we, in deference to what Mr. Ratliff is saying, I don't think we have to do it November or
either we're going to move on that or we're not.
But we certainly need to make a decision on it and go on down the road.
Mr. Cortez.
So I suggested that because it looked like that's where we were headed. But if you look at our agenda, it'll tell you right there, these were adopted in 2012. I mean, and then now we're saying, okay, so we're suggesting public hearing November, first reading for the first meeting of the 2017 year, whether that's late January, early February, whatever that date of that meeting is. I don't know off the top of my head. But now you're suggesting that we limit it to what some of the members on this side of the room were saying, to just those
knowledge and skill statements.
The knowledge and skill statements. I mean, it just seems very confusing to Texas educators when we say we're only going to open it up, but just for this. So we're not really opening it up. We're telling them we're going to make this change. By the way, you can come tell us what you think, because they're already struck out here. And so it seems like this was already crafted with the intent to say, this is what I want, board, here it is, vote it up or vote it down. And so now the public hearing serves zero purpose, because we're going to give them a voice for nothing, because you're limiting to that one thing, which has already been made clear to us on our agenda, that we just want that struck out. So at this point, I'm going to go back to Member Ratliff's comments and say I don't think we should be doing this at all. I think we're treading some very dangerous waters, and I don't think that we should be doing this. So I would vote against the motion.
Mr. Allen, then Mr. Mercer.
one of the things I want us to keep in mind is that this has not been a 2-year process. It's been almost like a 5-year process. I mean, we don't want to throw out all the work that got us to the standards that we voted on unanimously before. And it's where streamlining, I think, got us to what we're talking about. Because everybody that we are, I guess the experts are saying that we're going to get there. I do believe there is some editing and revising that needs to be done, but there is no need to redo all the work that's been done, because we know that needs to be some clarity. If there was some statements that we heard that there was some unintended consequences, this was never supposed to occur, and it did, then we need to clean that up. But we don't need to visit the entire document to say, let's write new standards. That would be a tragedy. But if there was something that got out there that was never supposed to be, that seems simple to me. It never was supposed to be this way. Why can't we clean that up, not look at the entire document?
But that's part of what the streamlining process would be, which is what you're suggesting. And actually, Ms. Hardy, I do want to correct something that we did. We decided to do the science and social studies. We never made a decision on doing anything with math. There was never any decision on the...
And not allow any other changes in the text.
No, it just had to do with where we saw the need. We didn't think we had a need in the math, but now we're reconsidering that on whether we do need to streamline the math. Right. Gotcha.
Parents are quick coming.
Gotcha. So Mr. Allen, then I had Mr. Mercer, and then I've got Mr. Allen.
And back to me finally, and I actually seconded the motion for a very good reason, and I asked the parliamentarian or legal to make sure, because what I think Mr. Riley wants is exactly what Mr. Allen said and what I want. We have, and I'll give you one example, and it's kindergarten, right? Look on page I-10, and parliamentarian, tell me if I'm right, if we're crafting this right. I want to craft the scope of the amendment. And that's what I think Mr. Riley has done. In kindergarten, I-10, Section 2, numbers and operations. We have kids count 1 to 20, read, write numbers, count objects 1 to 20, recognize a quantity, what the numbers are, generate a number, use comparative language, describe, all that. All that stays. All that, as Mr. Allen said, is the work of our educators, what they wanted our kids to know. All we're saying to get rid of in kindergarten, just say apply mathematical process standards. That's all if we're correcting this correctly, I think we've got a scope in there. And everywhere I've seen, I go to kindergarten, first grade, over and over, I list the great things our educators have said that they want our kids done, but we're looking at limiting the scope and say the process standards, which is exact. So I'm asking the parliamentarian and legal, is that what we're doing? Because if I'm voting for that, I want to make sure we have a limited scope. Mr. Rowley, is that your intention, sir? And are we doing this? Because I don't want to open the whole thing up, but I want to, as Mr. Allen said, clean up some problems here and quit apologizing and say we can't do it. Clean up the problems.
Mr. Allen.
But limit that scope. Is that true? I'm asking legal and parliamentarian first. Is that, will that do this? His motion.
His motion, I believe, is citing subsections, particular subsections, correct? Current motion. So it's gonna just be those subsections. You can't bring in other stuff if you're just putting in those subsections.
And that's what I want, Mr. Rowley. Thank you, sir. I second your motion still.
Mr. Allen.
In recognition of our parliamentarians' comments about the chair's historical authority to set our agenda, does the chair feel properly advised about the will of this body of what we want to do in November? Do you
I have
need a
no
motion?
idea what you want to do, actually. Because
not without the motion.
I'm just being honest here, because we've got, from Mr. Allen, to me, streamlined process is a much more thoughtful, deliberative process than what we're trying to do, which is Band-Aid and say, okay, we think the problem is this. And I don't think we've got the input to say the problem is this and this will fix it. We're prescribing the fix before we understand exactly, the details about, in my opinion, and so I'm with my member from Houston.
So in order for you to feel like you're leading us where the board as a whole would like to go, you would prefer a motion to help clarify what we want to do with this in November.
Yeah, I want you to be comfortable with what we really want to do with these standards. That's where I'm not comfortable that you guys know what you want to do with the standards. That's where I am.
Will we ever
I'm
get
just,
there?
I'm just being
We're not
straight
sure
out.
what we want.
Yeah, Ms. Press.
Appreciate that. I am very clear about what I want to do with these standards. I believe we've heard, somebody asked whether or not we want to hear from our experts. We heard from our experts in 2012. We heard from our experts yesterday. I appreciate the voices that we've heard for the last 2 years about this. I think that we're taking action by considering streamlining. I don't think that we need to go any further into that. We need to consider the implications that opening up the TEKS would have, especially I keep thinking about instructional materials. We worry so much about the turnover for the instructional materials allotment to our school districts, whether or not they can't even keep up right now with our current proclamations. How do we expect them to then adapt to a change in instructional materials when they just purchased these books? I think I just want to be very clear that I know where I stand on this situation. I'm not confused about what I want. I completely support streamlining the math TEKS when we're at that point. I think we need to move from this conversation, and we need to just, I'm ready to move from this conversation. I'd like to call the question.
Okay. Is there, to call the question? Ordering the is there a second? Yeah, Dr. Dominguez. All in favor? All in favor? Okay, let's make sure we know what the question is. Because there are two motions pending here, and I want to make sure that I'm understanding what...
The main motion, the first amendment.
That to postpone, let me just make sure I've got it.
Okay.
Recommend that SBOE postpone first reading and filing authorization to the November meeting, or no? That's Maynard's motion, okay. Substitute.
It was to post a public hearing in November.
Okay.
No, that's my amendment. That's not the main motion.
Yeah, but we have to vote on that.
I've got the main motion, he's got the first rank amendment.
State the main motion again.
The one there. Okay, so the main motion is to recommend the State Board of Education postpone first reading and filing authorization to the November meeting for item number 3.
Right.
And as a substitute motion,
I recommend that the State Board of Education set for hearing this item in the November meeting, and then set it for first reading in the first meeting in 2017, limiting the scope of that hearing to the items that are proposed in
that have already
the
been
board.
proposed in the knowledge and skills statement.
Which is whether or not the knowledge and skills statements continue to include the process standards, which has been the whole topic that we've been talking about for the last 3 days and the last 6 months. That's it. And it's limited to that very specific tweak in the TEKS.
Okay. And there's a motion to shut off debate, which is pending and cannot be debated, so you'll...
And that's 2/3.
All in favor?
That's a
closing
2/3.
debate, raise your hands.
Okay, all in favor of closing debate, raise your hands. Okay.
Now we vote on the amendment. We vote on his motion. Okay. Now we're voting on my amendment. Yes.
Okay, so Mr. Rowley's amendment is to postpone, that the SBOE post a public hearing in November, at the November meeting, followed by the first reading in January 2017, specifically to address the knowledge and skills statements regarding the process standards. Is that clear enough? Okay. All those in favor of the amendment, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. And that's not a 2/3, that's just a majority.
That's right.
Right, just a majority.
So now we're at the motion as amended.
So this is the motion as amended.
Right. Which is
basically, it's.
Same thing.
I think you're voting twice on it, it's slightly different. So now we're voting on the motion as amended, which is to set the hearing for November, et cetera. So all in favor? You have to take it again.
Oh, okay, take it again, because it wasn't the main motion. Okay, so we have to take the exact same vote again?
It's not the exact same vote, it's the same wording.
Okay.
9 o'clock tonight, I'll give it.
Okay, all right, so we're recommending, the committee of the full board is recommending that we post a public hearing in November, followed by the first reading in January of 2017 regarding amending the knowledge and skill statements in the mathematics TEKS. All in favor, say aye. Just say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, let's do a show of hands on that one because I'm not quite sure. All in favor, raise your hand. All in favor of doing what we originally voted on there?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7.
No, it's not. It's the same vote that we did.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Wait, is she voting? 1, 2.
Okay, hold your hand if you want to post a public hearing in November and a first reading in January. That's what you're doing.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There we go. Okay. Well, Lawrence voted in favor.
Oh, Lawrence voted in favor?
Oh my gosh. All opposed, take the vote, take the vote.
All opposed to post a public hearing in November and a first reading in January.
Well, we have people voting twice.
Wait a minute. You voted twice.
Start over. Start over. All in favor? All in favor?
Okay, did I need to take this again because are people confused? Okay, so we're only doing the opposed. Okay, all those who are opposed to the public hearing in November with first reading in January.
5?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. 9 to 5, okay.
9 to 5. Yeah.
Get the chair her white wine.
No, I don't need that. That's not going to help. Yeah. Right.
Down with number 3.
Right.
Believe it or not.
Let's do a 5-minute break. Yeah.